Welcome back to our next edition of the CBB Review Studio podcast. I am Dan Siegel, joined as always by my co-host Ben Anderson, and we are back with another edition of CBB Rank. We are going to be previewing teams in our CBB Rank from 35 to 31. Before we get started, just wanted to remind everyone, if you have found us here at CBB Review and you are not subscribed, we would appreciate that. It really helps us out, costs nothing on your end, and we're trying to ramp up that number. We really have a lot of content churning out on our CBB Review Studio show, where we will be finishing the CBB rank before the start of the regular season and then really ramping it up once the regular season starts. Also check out CBB Review Courtside, also on this channel. We got a Micah Shrewsbury interview coming up there soon, a couple mid-major coaches coming up as well. So be sure to check that out. Let's get going. Number 35 on CBB rank, we have the UCLA Bruins. Mick Cronin has brought UCLA back, right? 3 consecutive Sweet 16s. One of those turned into a Final Four run a couple of years ago. But a lot of where that fuel came from behind those runs, you know, the Tiger Campbells, the Jaime Jaquez's, etc., those guys are gone. And Adem Bona is now the lone returner with 20-plus minutes under his belt per game. It's clear that this team is expected to take a step back, right? I don't think I'm saying anything bold there. I think the real question for debate is, how far does this team step back? How big is that step, in other words?
I am a little bit worried about UCLA. The more I look into it, they have some interesting pieces, namely Ade Mara, the number 15 overall recruit, as you can see on the screen. If you're not listening to us on YouTube, he is coming from Turkey, and he's projected by some as a top 5 NBA draft pick in 2024. So that's certainly a name to keep an eye on. But it's a lot of things will have to go right for the Bruins this year in order for them to be a good team. And I would rather bet against that, in my opinion. I'm particularly concerned with the backcourt, excuse me. Dylan Andrews is projected to be the point guard. He only averaged 11 minutes a game last year. And then he doesn't really have a lot of backups. They have a ton of freshmen coming in, but none of them are true guards, right? And that's something I saw as we were looking through it. There's a lot of wings, a couple of big guys, but really it's Sebastian Mack, right? Dylan Andrews. Sebastian Mack is an incoming freshman as well. Then Will McClendon is a redshirt sophomore, but he didn't get much play at all last year. And that's kind of it in terms of the backcourt depth. So that's something to keep an eye on as we look at this team.
Yeah, there's a lot of freshmen, right? And Mara is the most notable one, who could be a one and done. That's your guy that could be a one and done. I do like Sebastian Mack. I think he could come in and really, at some point, be that guy that takes over the offense, but it's really difficult to rely on him to do that right away. Otherwise, yeah, like you're relying on Adem Bona, who is solid. And yes, I think he could take his games to the next level. But then outside of that, who do you have? Lazar Stefanovic. He really had his flaws at Utah in this conference. I'm not sure. I agree, but here's the thing: like, Mick Cronin could absolutely make magic happen. I have trouble putting UCLA outside of like that top 25, top 30. I think 35 is fair, but I have trouble believing that they drop an absolute dud of a season, right? And I think also this team is set up well for the coming years. They're definitely going to have some positives this year, but there's a reason they're 35 and not in the top 15 like they've been.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But you will remember, Mick Cronin did have an 11 seed 1 year here at UCLA. However, that 11 seed did go to the Final Four and was a Jalen Suggs buzzer beater away from making the national championship game. Could that be sort of where we're at this year? I think that's definitely a possibility. I do think they'll be really good next season, though. That's something I'm looking forward to watching in 2024.
Yeah, maybe we see this incoming freshman class, follow the same trajectory of that class 3 years ago, right?
Absolutely.
11 seed made a big run as they figured it out, and then 2 very good seeds and won a couple each time. So, yeah, that could very easily happen. It's like we're going backwards in time almost. But let's move on to our 34th team in our CBB rank, we've got the Florida Gators, who did not have a good year last year. Todd Golden came in from San Francisco to coach the team. That was his first year last year in 22 to 23. They did show some signs of life later on. Of course, like I said, their full body of work was super underwhelming. The expectations were not too high last year, though. I think the expectation level has definitely risen this year, especially given our 34th ranking. What do you think, Ben?
I really like this team. I think this has a very good chance to succeed. And for me, it starts with Riley Kugel, one of the top returners in college basketball, in all of college basketball, in my opinion. His statistics don't necessarily show that, but I think he has a lot of potential. The NBA draft scouts really like him, but I think he can do a lot as a college player as well. So that's a name to keep an eye on. Other than that, though, it really comes down to the transfer class. Zion Pullen has rave reviews from the Big West coaches that played against him or coached against him while he was at UC Riverside. So I'm interested to see how that will translate over to the SEC. And one name I don't have up here, but I also find interesting, is Micah Handlogten, a transfer from Marshall, who's an elite shot blocker. So really, it was a well-rounded transfer class, and that's something you're looking for when you're talking about Florida. You had a lot of pieces to replace, mainly Colin Castleton and Kyle Lofton are the two big ones there, in my opinion. But I think Todd Golden has done a good job with this roster, and I think they are in position to compete for at least a double bye in the SEC tournament.
So if we recall from Todd Golden's San Francisco days, specifically that one team that was really good, got a 10 seed, and won a few games in the regular season against power conference opponents, or at least that one against Virginia. I remember that one. But they were a run and gun style on offense, right? They like to play fast. They like to drive to the rim, kick out opportunities, get some threes. And Golden was dealt Colin Castleton as his best player last year. And Colin Castleton was a stud. He was really good, but I don't think that's the way he likes to run his offense, is through a true big man. So maybe this, I really think this team in 2023 to 24 fits the mold of what Todd Golden wants to do more. And that makes a lot of sense, right? He got his guys through the portal. He crafted this roster. He didn't really inherit any of it. But so for that reason, I really like what they bring to the table. You mentioned Riley Kugel at the wing. Will Richard from the bench should play a key role. George projected him first off the bench, but I think that's going to be a key player right there. And then, like you said, the backcourt with Zion Pullen and Walter Clayton Jr., both guys coming from mid-major schools. That's where their ceiling is going to be, or where they don't reach their ceiling, because those guys were superstars at the lower major levels, and that's kind of going to be a theme for some of these teams. They combined 34 points per game last year. So how does it translate from the SEC? And for what it's worth, I think those guys really have what it takes from a physicality perspective, as opposed to a lot of the other lower major guys that average similar numbers. So that definitely helps. But I think the other issue with Florida, they're just, or the major issue, I should say, they are maybe not capable of playing more than 7 or 8 deep without a huge drop off. I know Todd Golden's team with San Francisco had established tight rotations, so maybe that'll be the case with Florida. That's really where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I can see that, especially with EJ Jarvis announcing he'll be stepping away from the team in the game, I believe, for the season. That was just announced either today or yesterday. Definitely hope everything is okay with him, but it also is a blow to their depth, right? Now they're looking at really 6 strong and hoping that someone, maybe Alex Sismich steps up a big, or Denzel Aberdeen, maybe Julian Rishwain, a transfer from San Francisco, back from Boston College initially. A couple of options there, but probably going to need one more person to step up.
All right, now we got a pair of teams that are interesting to talk about. We'll start with number 33. We have the Xavier Musketeers. Okay, so I'm going to preface this little segment by clarifying that we made these rankings 67 days ago, right? We finalized them at Team 100. So this was before the injury news came out. That being said, as we stand when we record here today on October 6th, we are very well aware that Xavier's arguably their top two players, in Zach Freemantle and Jerome Hunter, are out for what is likely the season. So now, Sean Miller did deal with injuries last year, Freemantle actually included, and he turned it into a Sweet 16 run. But I think this is a much tougher situation than last year.
Yes, I would agree, especially considering their losses other than Freemantle and Jerome Hunter. When you lose four guys like Sule Boom, Colby Jones, Jack Nungy, and Adam Kunkel, like that's a tough rebuilding job or reloading job, I would say, for Sean Miller, even without Freemantle and Hunter's injuries. And to add on top of it, Logan Duncombe, the transfer from Indiana, announced he was retiring from the game of basketball due to undisclosed matters. So that was our projected starting center as well. They were really hurting for depth at this point. They're probably going to need one of their freshmen to step up. Yes, I agree with you. If they had Freemantle and Hunter, this 33 is going to be a good ranking, right? Especially with the 3 Conference USA transfers they brought in, particularly Davion McKnight. I really like. I think he's going to be a really good starting guard, maybe even in the Sule Boom fashion, right? Apparently, it's a CUSA to Cincinnati pipeline here that's coming for Sean Miller. But with all of the pieces they just lost, I don't really see them being super competitive, at least in the way that we thought they were going to be in the Big East.
I totally am with you there. The backcourt, like I said, is built pretty similar to Florida, with their mid-major superstars coming into the upper level to the Big East in this case, with McKnight and then Quincy Olivari from Rice, who averaged 16.5 and then 18.7 points per game respectively. But I think those guys don't have the same physicality that the Florida duo has. Even outside of them, what are you really banking on now, right? You need big leaps from that rising sophomore class with Desmond Caudy and Cam Kraft. That could be your 3-4 combo right there. And maybe that the freshman class is a little bit ahead of schedule, but none of those guys are in the top 50. So it's not like we're expecting big years from them right away. It's really unfortunate for the Xavier program, because not only do you not have these 2 players that were going to be the lifeblood of your team, Freemantle and Hunter, not only do you not have them, you found out pretty recently that you're not going to have them. So it's not like they had the whole offseason to plan for them and account for their losses. I think that's the biggest key right there. And it's hard to attribute that to a coaching failure, right? Even if Sean Miller's team does underperform this year, there's a clear reason, and he couldn't really control that.
Yeah, it's a tough position overall. Xavier will probably struggle a little bit in the Big East, but I'm cheering for the team, cheering for the Musketeers, and hopefully maybe by the end, Freemantle or Hunter or both can get back on the court.
All right, let's talk about another team that's dealing with a similar scenario, Mississippi State, who, for what it's worth, I don't even think they belong here in the first place at 32. I would put them 10, 15, 20 spots lower on our list, but they're dealing with a similar scenario. Tolu Smith is out for a while, not the whole season as we stand today, but likely the whole non-conference portion of the season. As Ben pointed out on the slides, there's nobody too daunting on that non-conference slate, so I guess that's kind of damage control right there. Teams really that they're playing are just at best trying to get onto the right footing. You got your Washington States and Georgia Techs there. No one too daunting, but I don't know. Do you think they belong here with Tolu Smith? And then more importantly, how bad is losing Tolu Smith?
I mean, based on what we know and based on what we've seen in the past year for Mississippi State, this is a pretty devastating loss, right? Tolu Smith was that offense for a lot of the time, especially considering the fact that they could not shoot the ball from outside the 3-point line. If you'll remember, they had a chance to win their first 4 game last year and just a devastating miss overall, right? You could say. But yeah, no, this is huge. I mean, Jimmy Bell coming in from West Virginia is a solid depth piece in the front court, but he's not Tolu Smith, right? He's not, and he won't be Tolu Smith, and they're just going to have to accept that. You're going to need to see a lot of production from the guards, and I think a couple of them are capable. Particularly Andrew Tylor is an intriguing piece coming in from Marshall, averaged 20 a game there. But did he average 20 a game because he played in Marshall's offense, right? And that's sort of the question you got to ask when you're looking at this coming in, transferring to the SEC, particularly in an up year like this one. DJ Jeffries is still in college somehow, right? A couple of these names, as we're going through the top 100, I just see these names. And I'm like, wow, that's incredible. He's been here forever, but he'll come back. He's a good piece, good starter for Chris Jans here. The key is going to be Deshaun Davis and Shaquille Moore, in my opinion. Those two plus Andrew Tylor, the guards are just going to have to do so much of the scoring here.
Yeah, and I'm glad you ended your little speech on that, because I don't think you emphasized enough how bad Mississippi State was at shooting the three ball. Like, this was a team that made the tournament while being dead last in the nation in 3-point percentage. They were 26.6%. That was the exact reason they lost to Pitt in the first four. It eventually did catch up to them. And yes, you talked about like that one play at the end of the game. There were so many wide open misses. And I think they did address it in the portal at least a little bit. Andrew Tylor, you talked about him. Trey Fort is another interesting one. He's one of those JUCO guys that has video game numbers in his resume. 45.2% 3-point, I think, is the significant one there. And he's going to be getting a lot more difficult shots in the SEC. But then again, if you're shooting 45.2% at any level, I think it's clear that you could shoot the rock. But then again, like, what's their offensive game plan here, right? If you're relying on the guards, it's just so difficult, because Tolu Smith led the SEC in usage percentage last year. So it's another situation where if you had the offseason to plan around this, it's a different story. But they plan to probably once again have Tolu Smith lead the SEC in usage. And now you don't have him at all for multiple months at least. So again, very unfortunate right there.
Yeah, I don't really know what to make of this team. And the problem is we won't have a good answer until Tolu Smith comes back. But it's probably going to be like a 7-3, 8-4 type deal in the non-con, right? And then you'll say, okay, this is a middling SEC team that probably won't make the tournament. And then you'll see Tolu Smith, and then maybe you'll change your mind. But right now, I don't really think they are the 32nd best team in the country.
No. Okay. This is a much more intriguing team, in my opinion. Let's talk about number 31. We're going to end our episode on this team. We have the Kansas State Wildcats, and everyone knows Kansas State last year for their deep tournament run, and then Keyontae Johnson and his comeback story, and that was amazing. And then there's Markquis Nowell, who was just lighting up the world on fire during the tournament. What we forget is Jerome Tang was in his first year and way, way ahead of schedule at Kansas State. They were not supposed to do this at any point, especially in year one. Ben, I'm not making the same mistake about Kansas State 2 years in a row. I know their roster looks different. Still, I'm not making the same mistake. What do you think?
I think that they have a really good top six, right? They have the three players we see here. Tyler Perry is a fantastic player, right? Mm-hmm. Not Markquis Nowell-esque per se, but like just he's going to be a good replacement, right? He did great things at North Texas in a really slow offense, right? So you might even see those numbers increase as he gets to Kansas State. Naquan Tomlin is a great forward. He did his job when he in the first year, being that third option next to Johnson and Nowell. And then Arthur Kaluma didn't have the best season last year at Creighton, or at least in comparison to expectations, but he's still a really nice piece that they picked up from the transfer portal. And then they also have Cam Carter, David N'Guessan, and Quez Glover coming in from Samford as well. Those are six. And then I don't know what it looks like after that. And that's where I'm a little concerned, especially with the grind of the Big 12 schedule, like it always is. Are you going to be able to have the depth in the front court to be able to, maintain against foul trouble for N'Guessan and Tomlin? Are you going to just be able to defend with a particularly small lineup, in my opinion, right? Especially in the backcourt. I just have a little bit of concerns, but at the end of the day, it's Jerome Tang, and I think he's shown us enough to where we can trust him to figure this out a little bit, at least.
Yeah, that's. I think for that reason, I wouldn't have Kansas State like top 15, but I would have them a few spots, like maybe 5 or 6 spots higher than 31, because here's the thing, right? There are some question marks outside of your top 6. It's very thin there. Then again, we're like, how many teams have we talked about in the past that have 8 or 9 established guys? Those are the teams that we're going to talk to in the next coming episode. Talk about in the coming episodes. So they are more talented than the teams we talked about in the past in their top 6. And I think it really, like, I want to emphasize just how good of a hooper Tylor Perry is from North Texas, like you said, because I think he is perfectly capable of leading a team at this Big 12 level. 17.3 points per game last year. You mentioned it, but I just want to reiterate. They played at the slowest tempo in the country last year. 17.3 points per game is extremely impressive at North Texas. That's the reason he won Conference USA Player of the Year. Also was the NIT MVP. The assist numbers were not too high, but again, you have to understand where he's coming from. He was coming from that North Texas offense, and you needed to create a lot off the bounce in that offense. I think that's going to be really good for a Jerome Tang offense as well. So you got Tylor Perry, you got Tomlin and Kaluma, like you mentioned. That's a really good 3 and 4. It's real solid. The depth is what's separating them from the teams we're going to talk about in the coming episodes, but their starting lineup is just as good.
No, I absolutely agree with that. Like that, the starting lineup, you saw it last year. I mean, this was essentially the same problem they had last year. If you replaced Kaluma with Keyontae Johnson and Markquis Nowell with Tylor Perry. However, that's where you get into a little bit of issues, right? Because you're trying to replace Kaluma or Nowell and Johnson, and you don't necessarily know how that's going to work, how that's going to fit. Might take a couple of games, but Kansas State, no one's going to want to go play in Manhattan, even in Big 12 play, in my opinion.
Kansas is like a 3 seed, a 4 seed, a 5 seed. They go to the Sweet 16, an Elite 8. Like, no one's complaining.
No, not at all.
All right. Well, anything else on Kansas State or any of these 5 teams?
No, these are 5 intriguing teams. There's a lot of variation, I think, within these 5 teams, right? About missing the tournament versus being like a 3 seed, I think are, the wide variety that you see in these 5. But I'm really interested, college basketball is coming up, so can't wait to see what it actually looks like on the court.
Well, that's the point of the countdown. We are exactly 31 days away as we record this. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening. Like I said, be sure to subscribe if you have not already, either on our audio platforms or on YouTube. We appreciate that. Once again, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and take care.